Thanks, Cody. Thanks for setting this up and everyone for joining today. Today our topic is Lewy Body Dementia. It's a condition that is not well known by many people, but it is very common. I want to thank Byron Perry for being here today. We went through some interesting times together over the last couple of years, and he's here to share some of his pearls of wisdom and some of his experiences. But before we get to that, I wanted to give a little bit of background about Lewy Body Dementia. What is it? Well, first of all, Lewy Body Dementia is an umbrella term that really encompasses two main conditions that are quite different. One condition is called dementia with Lewy bodies, and the second condition is Parkinson's disease dementia. And so what is a Lewy body? So I think in 1912, there was a German neurologist, Friedrich Lewy. He was looking at sections of people's brains who had Parkinson's disease and looking at them under the microscope. And what he noticed in a number of the people is that he found these abnormal protein clumps in certain parts of the brain. And these protein clumps were made up of this protein called alpha-synuclein that we now recognize appears in people with Parkinson's disease, Lewy body dementia, and a third condition called multiple systems atrophy that is another Parkinson's cousin. But so he noticed that these clumps of alpha-synuclein were sort of congregating and would make this nice sort of pink proteinaceous body. And I think after he died, it was named Lewy body in his honor. But so these two conditions, dementia with Lewy bodies and Parkinson's disease dementia, really one big difference is the time course. So with dementia with Lewy bodies, the first problems that people usually have are cognitive. They may start having memory problems. They may start having confusion. They may start having episodes where they're having hallucinations, seeing things that aren't there. Some people may experience what we call delusions, or believing that things are happening that aren't really happening. Dementia with Lewy bodies, usually patients fluctuate pretty wildly. They'll have moments of extreme clarity where they seem like how they just used to be. And 5 minutes later, you're looking at this person saying, where in the world did they go? And what are they thinking about? And I had a patient who had a PhD in neuroscience who had Lewy body dementia. Mm-hmm. And I remember she would come in here and talk to me about all these neuroscientific findings and things that I couldn't even begin to understand. And then she would go home and put her shoes in the fridge. So big fluctuations from moment to moment. A challenge that we see in dementia with Lewy bodies is that they're very sensitive to medications. We try to give medications to treat some of the cognitive problems, or maybe some of the behavioral problems or the hallucinations, and people can have very strong reactions to the medications. So that's often a telltale sign that that's what happens. But soon after those cognitive and behavioral changes and some of the other problems can happen, over time, some folks will develop a tremor, or they'll develop slowness in their gait, things that look like people that have Parkinson's. But again, the cognitive problems start first. Then the second condition, Parkinson's disease dementia. So these are people who have Parkinson's disease that's been well established. We see the tremors, we see slowness in their gait, we see slow motion movement, trouble with balance, all those key features. And then when we give them the Parkinson's medicines, they get better. Levodopa, which improves the dopamine level in the brain, the movements get better. But over time, some people with Parkinson's disease can develop dementia. They can develop cognitive problems also. So it's really what comes first, the movement-related symptoms or the cognitive-related symptoms. And that's one big distinction between those two conditions. And if you look at the brains of people with those two conditions, we find the Lewy bodies in a very specific part of the brain in Parkinson's disease. It's called the midbrain. That's where the dopamine neurons live. That's where we typically find them. But people that have dementia with Lewy bodies, we find these protein deposits widespread throughout the brain. And so that can be a distinguishing feature as well. So, nuts and bolts, that's kind of what, Lewy body disease kind of encompasses both of those conditions. And so today we wanted to invite Byron to come and tell us a little bit about his experiences. His wife Shirley was one of our favorites here. There's still a photo in our back room of her, so we miss seeing her, but wanted to kind of hear from you a little bit and tell us, how did you meet Shirley? What was she like before she started having these health issues?
Okay. My name's Byron Perry. I will tell you, first of all, that Shirley would not be happy with this setting. I am surrounded by all these gorgeous women. And she would be going, and what's your name? How did we meet? A strange story. I was in Vietnam. Shirley had a friend who came to Vietnam. And before he left, he told her he was going to go find her husband. He did. He found me. I didn't know he was looking for a husband for his friend. But he joined my machine gun platoon. We got to be friends. He said, I've got this girl I want you to write. And so I started writing her. At the time, the relationship I thought I had back home had fallen apart, but I didn't know that either. Found out later on that young lady was pregnant, and that wasn't me because I was over here. I started writing Shirley. Told Shirley I'll come see when I get back. Got back home to Illinois. Didn't go see her. 2 weeks. Didn't go see her. She called me. You said you were coming to Boston. Oh, yes, ma'am. I went to Boston, stayed there a week. She worked at a bank. I had no money. I stayed at the YMCA. Would meet her for lunch. We'd have lunch at Burger King or something. Take the bus to her mother's house. And I would sit there and talk with her mother and her family. Shirley says that I spent more time talking to her mom than I did to her. I wasn't stupid. I knew where the power was. I left Boston, went back to my last 6 months in Fort Dix, New Jersey, and we talked on the telephone. This was before cell phones. I would be in a phone booth dropping in quarters by the button, and she would, or she would reverse charges. We spent a lot of money in phone calls. We talked almost every day. I proposed on the phone. She accepted on the phone. I didn't see her again until the day before we got married, 6 months later. I didn't take her for a drink. I didn't take her for a date. I didn't buy her flowers. And she made me pay for it every day since then. But that's how we met. She was vibrant. She was beautiful. People said she reminded them of Lena Hart. And she was a gorgeous woman. Absolute fashion model. She modeled for a while when she was a teenager. She had a special relationship with cloth. Towels, clothes, shoes. That was Shirley. We both grew up very poor. I was fortunate to find a good job that allowed us to buy things that we never had before. So I spoiled her as best I could. She had stuff that we hadn't even dreamed about. And I don't apologize for it. She was mine, I wasn't taking it. By the way, guys, I asked Cody to get these because I'm probably going to need them. Just so I'm not going to apologize for that. She will be, this Sunday is 18 months. And we were 4 months short of 55 years. She was special.
One thing that Byron would always, what he commented on is, how she looked and how she dressed. Every time she came in here, she was dressed to the T. Her nails were perfectly done. Her hair was done. Even when she started having more challenges, Byron made sure that she always looked amazing, and she always presented herself in that way. And that's how we remember her. Shifting gears a little bit, tell me, what were some of the first things that you noticed weren't quite right that made you seek medical attention?
She noticed it first. She had a tumor in her right hand. This was back in 2016. And that was just that. And her doctor thought it was benign, but it didn't go away. Benign tumors tend to fade over time. It didn't. Shirley had a pacemaker, and so they could not do the MRI test for Parkinson's. So they did a chemical test of some type. And the diagnosis was Parkinson's disease. For the next 2 or 3 years, there wasn't much difference. we moved to Charlotte. And I started noticing changes when she couldn't remember her shoes. Shirley had 140 pair of shoes. They were in 4 different closets in our house. She could tell you what shoes were in what box and what closet that box was in. She said, honey, give me the blue suede from Nordstrom's. Where are they? Second closet, top shelf, left, certain the bottom. One day, she was getting dressed to church. And I went into the closet and all the shoe boxes were on the floor. She couldn't find her shoes. And that had never, ever happened before. Later on, we were looking at family picture albums and she couldn't recall who the people were. That had never happened before. She always knew. She knew folks that, whose child is that? You know, you get baby pictures? Yeah. And I'm like, I don't know. Shirley would know who's, oh, that's so-and-so's child. And good God, how do you do that? But those skills started to deteriorate. Shirley was a good cook, and I consider her a master baker. And she got to the point to where it was difficult to remember the recipes. She was known for her New York cheesecake, which required X numbers of eggs. And she would have it all out and she would stand there and look at it. And I would say, what's wrong? She said, I don't know how many eggs I put in. I said, we can figure it out. So we'd go in the garbage can and put out the eggshells and count the eggshells and we'd figure out how many eggs. That happened 2 or 3 times, but it got so frustrating that she stopped baking because she could no longer trust herself to do it and do it well. And if it wasn't done well, she wasn't going to do it. We lived in Colorado and she baked a chicken one afternoon. I'm on the deck having a margarita. The sliding glass doors open and this chicken was flying past my head. I said, what the heck? She said, it didn't come out right. So there was a chicken on the grass and I went and got pizza. If Shirley was going to do it, it was going to be done well. If she was going to present it to you, it was going to be the best she could give you. We bought plates, ceramic plates, to put cakes on so she could give it to people and they could keep the plate. She wasn't worried about it, but that's who she was. But those skills and those things that were important to her slowly started to dissipate and disappear. She would try to read her Bible and couldn't, or would read the same passage 3 and 4 and 5 times. Honey, help me. I don't understand this, and I just read it. So we talk about it. But that became more and more and more prevalent, and it was clear that she was having difficulty.
And as a caregiver, you know, what would you say were your biggest challenges, and what do you wish maybe you had known earlier or sooner?
You know, you asked me that question by text the other day, and I'm not sure that I can say what I wish I would have known sooner, because I'm afraid that if I had known it sooner, I would have done something different that would change it. So I'm not sure. I think what a better question might be, what have you learned during the process? And you learn very quickly that it's not about you at all. It's about your partner. I haven't got to tell those of you who are married that marriage is never 50-50. There are days where you need 60% and your partner gives it to you. And there are days when you need 90%. And there are days when you ain't got 50% to give. So it becomes a balancing act. Shirley said it took me 20 years to figure it out. And she finally got me trained. But this is much like that. It was to the point to where she could not do. And so I stepped in and did that. Luckily, my mom had my mother raised 7 kids as a single parent. So I learned to cook when I was 9. I learned to sew when I was 7. I could clean house by the time I was 5. My sisters are on the call, and they can tell you that's absolutely true. My dad died when I was 9. I became the man of the family. with 6 brothers and sisters, all younger than me. And mom went to work. So we took care of each other as a family. I was telling Dr. Iyer earlier, this same group, we talk every 6:30 every Monday night. We have a family call. We started that during COVID, and it was wonderful. We got a chance to relive old memories and relive old hurts and relive old pains and forgive old wounds. And it's been a wonderful thing. We do it every Monday night at 6:30. And Kathy and Ardella and Jason and the rest of the guys are on there, and they are part of the family. But that's what you learn, is that you have to give as much as you can because your partner no longer can. It took me a while during Shirley's condition to figure out that she's doing the best she can. Yeah, it's funny. You don't want to accept that your reality has changed because it's the same for you. There are no people out there looking in the windows. There is not a person next door trying to take your husband. There is not. I used to work at Lowe's, 6 to 10 in the morning. I come home at 10 o'clock, and Shirley said, "Who's that woman in your car?" Huh? Who is that woman in your car? Shirley was Christian. She didn't curse, but she came as close as she could to it. That's why I said she would not be happy with this outfit. All of you are potential girlfriends, and she would see that in her mind. But you're right. What the hallucinations are one thing. The delusions, what you believe to be true, are much more insidious, much more real. I mean, they become actually reality. And for those of us who are not in that space, we don't understand it. My son and I were talking, and I said, Bryce, it's tough enough for us out here watching mom go through this. What's it like for her in there? And we didn't know. And we could never know. But you soon learn that you have to figure out that what is real for her is therefore real for you. And you now deal with it on a totally different perspective. Am I making sense?
Absolutely. One of the mottos we have in our practice is, we want everyone to be calm, clean, safe, and loved. Often the calm gets disturbed when hallucinations and delusions and paranoia show up because there's often this push and this pull and trying to convince the individual that no, there's nobody looking in our window, there's nobody here in the house, I'm not having an affair, I'm not putting poison in your food, and those kinds of things, and trying to convince that person. It ends up a lot of butting of heads, and it creates a lot of tension within the household. And I know as we were sort of working through some of these challenges, I saw an interesting change take place. Byron, at one point, we could see the stressors, we could see how it was affecting you. And
you saw it, I didn't.
As a man, you're a fixer. You want to fix what's right in front of you. Another caregiver shared with me that if an idea or a thought doesn't enter someone's head through logic and reason, then you're not going to be able to remove it using logic and reason.
Yes.
So the more you tell them this isn't what's happening, the more they're going to dig their heels in. And at one point, Byron came in, and there was just a much different sense of calm that he had. And I think that's when you took that, you made that shift, and you realized, what, I can't change what she's thinking. I can change how I react to it.
I found a new bourbon. He is right. That's exactly what happened. I can't fix it, and I always have before. So you learn to pivot, and you adjust, and you do those things that you need to do to take care of your partner. There isn't any choices there in my mind. Someone, a friend of mine said, this is a side of you I've never seen before. I said, what are you talking about? I've always been kind and wonderful. He said, I know you as a kick-ass, hard-charging, take no prisoners business person. This guy and I work together. He said, I see a side of you now I don't recognize. I'm like it. But who is that? And you do what you don't expect you're going to have to do because you need to.
That's well said. You know, one thing we try to do here, as many of you know, and at our visits, we typically will try to have separate rooms where patients will go and our nurses will administer some testing and go over certain things. And then we have a separate room where the family, the caregivers, so to speak, will go. And sometimes, you know, that's where we like to go to find out what's really happening at home. What are the things that you want to tell us that you wouldn't want to share in front of us? You know, a challenge that we had was, you know, Shirley wasn't into that. You know, she
did not like that.
Didn't want people in the other room talking about her, and which made some of the discussions a little bit tricky to try to understand what was really happening. And one thing Byron did really well was how he advocated for her. He would call us at different times when he wasn't at home and say, hey, listen, I wanted to let you know what's happening. These are some of the things I've noticed. And if I talk about this at the visit tomorrow, Shirley's going to kill me. But this is what's happening. Or he would send us a message to the portal. But he was always giving us the information we needed to be able to make good decisions in terms of how would we manage those things. You know, what medications might we try? What might we do differently? And I think you did a really good job of helping us understand, even though Shirley didn't want you telling us anything. So that was really good in terms of how you were able to kind of, you know, advocate for her. You know, as things really started to progress, and as all these conditions do, you know, we always think about what, you know, how do you help people, you know, with those transitions. And I remember learning in medical school, one of my teachers told me, you know, your job is to help people live with dignity and to help them die with dignity. And at some point as physicians, you know, we have to realize that, you know, things have gotten to a point where there's no calm, things are going in the wrong direction. How do we help keep everybody in the situation comfortable? And that's where we start having the discussions about hospice care. And hospice doesn't mean that we're giving up. When we talk about hospice, often people, their eyes light up and say that means you're throwing your hands up, you're throwing in the towel, and you're not going to help us. You know, just the opposite. And when we first broached that topic and said, you know, Byron, I think it's time for us to involve the hospice people, let's call them and have them come in for a visit. Initially, I think Byron had that look in his eyes of, what is that? What do you mean? And does that mean you're going to stop trying to help her? We said just the opposite. And so we arranged for the hospice team to come and talk to Byron and his family. And he called me later that night. And I remember there was that sense of calm again. I think you understood what they were going to try to help you with. And if you don't mind sharing some of that, what did you learn about the hospice process and how they can help families?
Hospice has a stigma. There's no doubt about that. People hear it and immediately they assume that's it, it's over. And I'm a little bit of a nerd. So you said hospice and I went to the computer and I Googled hospice and we just read all about it. And it is so much different from what you expect or what you think you know. I got to meet the nurse practitioners and the nurses. They came in, they were wonderful, very kind, very caring. Let me digress for a second. That's what made you guys so special. It was because you were kind and caring. We had other doctors before we got here and never got the sense that we were anything more than just another patient and her husband. We had one lady here in Charlotte who would not look Shirley in the eye. And Shirley said, I'm not going back there. And she said, bitch, this time. Shirley, Shirley never. And I don't even know how we found you. I think just researching it. But thank you so much for being who you are and what you do here. But hospice became important to us, as was speech therapy, as was physical therapy. But the hospice folks made what was going to be the inevitable end not quite so frightening. It was explained. What was going to happen was explained. The different stages you could expect was explained, and I backed that up with internet research. So nothing that happened in the last 3 or 4 months was anything that we hadn't been told to anticipate. Did not make it any easier to go through or any easier to accept, but knowledge is power. And having the knowledge, having at least a roadmap or a partial roadmap of what's coming made it a little bit easier. But those folks were great. They would, in the last month, they were there every day. And that was important. It gave me a sense that somebody else other than me was helping with this. You know, my daughter-in-law was next door, my son was next door. My daughter-in-law's mother, who was a nurse, would fly in from Denver and help us. All of that was great, but to know the hospice nurse was going to be here at 3, pretty cool.
And beyond just helping, manage medications and things when making sure that the patient, him or herself, isn't suffering in any way. They also have social workers that can do a lot of counseling for the family members and helping them understand, how are things progressing? Where are we in this process?
There was a chaplain.
And so there's a chaplain. And so I think it's a challenging situation to bring up the topic of hospice and when is the right time. But I also think, it's a disservice if you don't. Because it is such an important thing to have to talk about. We consider Byron, one of our graduates. He was an amazing caregiver, and he's graduated now. And we learn something from every family that we work with. And I think we learn a lot about the power of the human spirit, and what you can do when you don't think you can actually do that. And I think it's amazing to see that transformation. And what I love even more is that Byron pops in here from time to time just to say hello and to get a hug or to drop something off. Or, there were a few items like a walker and a few other things that he donated when he didn't need them anymore. And just to see, many people in this situation wouldn't ever want to come back here. It's a tough place to be.
Well, you and Robin give great hugs. That's what it is. But it was, you became a part of our family, and it was important to me and important to Shirley that we recognize that, and there were things that I no longer needed that someone else might, and it helped to be able to say, hey, can you use this? I know you can find someone who can use this, and you were gracious enough to text those things. Thank you so much.
One important aspect, they tell you when you get on the airplane, you have to put your oxygen mask on first, and then you can help everyone else. What advice would you have for other caregivers in terms of how they can take better care of themselves through a process like this?
You and Robin told me that. I didn't believe y'all. I'm fine. I got an S on my chest under this shirt. I can do this.
You thought.
Who said that? But my sisters both told me, you need to take care of yourself. Robin was the bulldog. She was on my case about that. Did you see a doctor? Did you call your physician? Byron, have you made that? Do you want me to call? No, I'll do it, Robin. And I went to see my doctor. And I told my doctor, I said, I walked in here a healthy 77-year-old man. I'm walking out with 3 pills. What the hell's going on? I had high blood pressure. I didn't know it. I had a condition in my legs called peripheral artery disease, a result of high cholesterol and high blood pressure, and no longer exercising the way I had been before. So I walked out with baby aspirin and atorvastatin and something else. I'm going, dang. I did not know that I was under stress. I didn't feel stress. I was doing what I had to do. But then my sisters flew out here from Chicago and stayed with Shirley for a week, where I could go play golf with some buddies up in Oregon. And I had been there 2.5 days. And I had called back home every day. I think our double or Kathy one told me, stop calling here. We got this. Leave us alone. And after 2.5 days, I relaxed. But I didn't know I relaxed until I relaxed. We came back, and Bryson, Lana, and I talked. It's my son and his wife, and realized that I needed more time away from being on duty than I realized. I mean, on duty is 24 hours a day. If Shirley slept, I slept. If Shirley didn't sleep, I ain't no way I was sleeping. I ate better then because I was cooking for her. I've discovered in the 18 months since she's been gone that I'm not eating as well, and therefore my clothes are all shrunk. I don't know how that happens in the house, but this is pop. This didn't pop before. But you need to take care of yourself and find a way to do that. One of the notes I made was you have to learn to be selfish when you get the chance to be selfish. Take a walk, have a drink, sleep late. Shirley and Bryson and Lana said, Dad, we'll take Mom on Sundays. So I got to look forward to Sundays. They'd get Mom about 6 in the morning, and I'd turn over and go back to sleep. And that was a luxury I hadn't had in years. And I'd go down to Starbucks and have a cup of coffee and sit there for 2 hours and read. That's a luxury I hadn't had in years. You need to find out what you can do to recharge your own batteries. Because if your batteries aren't charged, you really can't help the person that you're helping. But that you got to get over the guilt of being selfish. And that's a funny thing to say, isn't it? But you feel guilty for wanting to do something just for you, when you know you've got other responsibilities. After Shirley passed, I was talking to her pastor back in Denver, and he said, Byron, you know it's okay to be relieved, don't you? And I'm going, oh, because I was. I didn't want to admit that. He says it's okay to be relieved. You fought the good fight. You finished the course. You kept the faith. You did everything you could. And you can breathe a bit more now. And I had never thought about it that way. Didn't want to think about it that way. We're not trained to think about it that way. We're not trained to be that selfish. But being that selfish is really an act that is necessary to allow you to give more. Because if it, a battery is just potential energy, it doesn't do anything until you plug it in. But when you plug it in, you expect something to happen. Well, if you've depleted it and done nothing to recharge it, then when you plug it in, nothing's going to happen.
I think it's a great point that you make. Caregiver stress syndrome is actually a term that's now been recognized by the American Medical Association. And if somebody is given that diagnosis, it really behooves their physicians to pay closer attention to them. Their blood pressure, heart disease, diabetes, depression, strokes happen at an alarming rate in people that have caregiver stress syndrome. And there's one statistic that always sticks out in my mind, and that's for caregivers that are for caregivers and their partners who are the patients that are beyond age 70. 70% of the time the caregiver dies first, because they're not tending to themselves. They're not making it to their doctor's appointments. They're not getting their exercise. So as Byron said, everyone feels guilty for being selfish, but it's a bigger problem when the caregivers go down. So I think it's an important point to make, and you made it very well. Oh, Robin beat it into me. Well, Byron, thank you very much for sharing your experience and your wisdom. And I know these things aren't easy to talk about, but I think if the next family can learn from you, it's definitely worth it. So thank you. I'd like to open it up to questions, and I'm sure some people may have submitted some already. And
yeah, so there's 3 questions that were submitted online, so I'll just go ahead and read them out, and whoever feels comfortable can answer. The first question is around selecting a proper memory care facility, or knowing when is the time that you want to call and kind of start vetting those facilities. So do you have any advice for what that looks like?
You know, I'd referred to our motto: calm, clean, safe, and loved. And so how do we know that we're okay in our current living situation? You know, whether it's at home, or do we need to look at bringing in caregivers? Do we need to look at going to assisted living, or even beyond that? So, you know, when we talk about the calm, some patients develop a lot of anxiety. Some people get very agitated, very angry. It can be very difficult for a caregiver to manage those behaviors by themselves. They often become the target of it. So when you feel the calm start to suffer, that's a time to think about, what help do we need? Do we need more caregivers at home? Do we need to think about an alternate solution outside the home? You know, the clean refers to a number of different things. You know, personal hygiene is one. Some patients who start to develop dementia will really start pushing back when it's bath time. They don't want to shower. They'll stop doing those things to the point where there may be frequent urinary tract infections and other problems. Many people lose the ability to toilet themselves, and that can be a big fork in the road, because, you know, not all caregivers are built to manage those things for their loved ones. That's often a time that we hire caregivers, or we may have to make a move. Safety is a big one too. You know, early on driving, you know, that's a non-negotiable. But other safety issues are falls. You know, frequent falls, no matter having someone's eyes on you 24 hours a day. When people start falling constantly, that means maybe we do need to look at a facility where there's a little bit more supervision, where patients can be managed differently. You know, other safety issues can be medication management. If you're having trouble managing the meds, organizing the meds, taking the wrong meds at the wrong time, where you might need another layer of assistance, then we hire caregivers, we hire pharmacists, or you move to an assisted living where they do that for you. You know, other things involve cooking, you know, leaving the stove on, those types of things. But again, when you look at the calm, the clean, the safe, and the loved, we know they're loved. So it's those 3 things. If you can't check one of those boxes, then you have to ask yourself the question, you know, what is a solution so that we can check that box? And that's the way I would approach how do we know it's time to look at memory care or a different situation.
I was fortunate; I was able to handle most of that myself. But you're right. It's funny how all-encompassing it is. It is everything from A to Z, and it's 24/7. Shirley was very frightened about many things, and if your partner is frightened, your job is to make sure she understands she's safe, and that you're going to protect her. But I remember one time they used to keep a axe handle outside the back door. Shirley brought it inside and put it inside the bed. My brother said, "Is that safe?" And I said, "I don't know." Sure enough, Shirley had an episode one night, and she was swinging the axe handle. And I have this. We bought a $4,000 bedroom suite when we got to Charlotte. It now has axe handle dents in it from Shirley hitting it. I was in the kitchen one day, had my back to her, and I got hit over the head with a serving platter. By this time, I was used to aberrant behavior. I just said, "What the heck was that?" And there are ceramics all over the floor. And you learn very quickly that your normal reactions don't work anymore. You can't get angry, you can't get mad, you can't yell, because that just exacerbates it. So I calmly said, "Oh, we broke that? Okay, babe." And we picked it up, stay there, don't move. The next day I asked her, I said, "Honey, why did you hit me with that serving platter?" She said, "Oh, that was you?" And we laughed about it. But you know, you learn very, very quickly that there are things you can't control. What you can control is how you choose to react to those things. And that's a steep learning curve. But I finally got there. But surely, you do things to mitigate it. I locked up all the kitchen knives in a locked box because she would stab pillows with them because she thought there was someone in there. Any guns in the house were locked up. They already were anyway. We were going to teach her to shoot. And I said, I don't think so. She said, I agree. I shouldn't do that. You know, we did the normal grab bars and stairs and railings and stuff like that. But you end up adult-proofing your house, much like you do baby-proofing your house. I had to take the knobs off the stove. Yeah, because she would turn it on. Something about that bright glowing glass top stove fascinated her. But I was so afraid she was going to put her hand on it or something. So we took the knobs off so she couldn't do that. But you end up doing those things you never thought you'd have to do. But it's important.
Yeah. Thank you guys for that. The next question is around hallucinations, and you guys touched on that a little bit earlier. So is it a better practice to agree with the hallucinations or kind of remind them of reality? And I guess that can also be the same question for delusions as well.
Well, I think, Byron said it very well, just as real as those things, were to Shirley, they weren't real to him, but he wasn't going to be able to convince her otherwise. So trying to convince them usually doesn't work, and it usually exacerbates the situation. I tend to urge people not to participate in the hallucinations, like agreeing that they're there and doing things. Sometimes an easy way to go about it is, that must be one of those Parkinson's images and that you can see and I can't. Change the subject, redirect, do something else. And usually it'll pass, but the more you try to fight it, the harder they're going to hang on to it, and then they're going to start blaming you, and there's something wrong with you, or you think there's something wrong with me, and it creates all that tension, and the caregivers often become the bad guys, so you don't want to stay in that role longer than you have to.
It's very, very difficult to do. It's situational. I learned very quickly that you can't argue them out of it. It's real to her. There were people out there who were trying to hurt us. There were squatters in upstairs. They were going to take our house if we left it. There was a woman in my car waiting for me to come out in the garage. I can't see her, honey, but I used the honey that partners is messing with you again, baby. Try to make a light of it. But there were other times when you can't make light. We drove back to Chicago for Thanksgiving 2 years in a row. And Shirley, at 70 miles an hour, would take off her seatbelt and try to open the car door. That's not the time to be, honey, grab her and I'm getting off the road. We stopped overnight on that trip. It's a long trip. And 2 miles from the hotel, she decides that I am someone who has kidnapped her and I'm going to rape her. And she rolls down the window, yelled, "Wait! She was, by this time, 85 pounds and couldn't really do it loud, but she could take out my seatbelt. And I'm at a stop sign. My wife is leaving the car. And I'm going, and I'm grabbing her. And, you have to be forceful that time. I grab her, and thank God she's 85 pounds. I can pull her back in and seatbelt. And I'm holding the seatbelt now, driving, getting the hotel, making sure she's there. She's screaming and yelling. And I'm surrounded in this strange city. They're going to think this lady's crazy. I'm crazy. The cops are going to come get me. Oh, it's real. That same trip, this is a cute one. Shirley had a fur coat. We had saved 7 years to get this fur. She loved it. She insisted on taking it to Chicago. Okay, you might need it in Chicago. The hotel, when we get to the hotel, I want my fur in the safe. I'm saying, that little room safe is not going to cut it, baby. So we went to the front desk and they didn't have a safe. I'll take care of it myself. That night I slept with my wife and her fur coat in our bed. She wasn't going to, there was no other way. She had to have it. And she wrapped her arms around it and her hand, me, and fur coat and shirt. That's the way it was. But it's situational, but you cannot, if there's not logic in there, logic won't get it out. Very well said, because it's not logical to you does not mean it's not logical to her. And you've got to put yourself in those shoes. That's a difficult thing to do. I learned, I no longer thought it. Shirley was convinced that people were stealing her clothes. She would empty her entire closet. I told you she was a clothes hog now. Her entire closet onto the bed. Clothes piled up to here. And she would sit there so nobody would get them. I'm going, oh, because I'm going to put them back. And so I put them back. And 2 days later, she did the same thing again. And at first I was angry about it. And I'd call Lana and Bryce, and they'd come help me. We hang up mommy's clothes. After a while, I got to the point, you know what? She ain't hurting you. She ain't hurting herself. She enjoys doing it. Let her alone. It means I got to hang up some clothes. I got very good at it. Not a problem. You learn to take your victories where you can. I wasn't going to win that battle. And why make it a battle? Hey, babe, want to help me hang these back up? Okay. And we spent an hour hanging the clothes back up again. Only to repeat it again 2 or 3 days later. You have to decide what's important. That, what irritated me initially, was not important yet. It was not important. What's important was she was healthy, she was safe, she was taken care of. And if we got to put clothes up and down the closet, so what? Big deal.
It's a great point.
Yeah. The last question that I have is around support groups. So if there is any support groups that either of you know, or Byron, that you had attended to assist in that caregiving experience.
I did not have a lot of good experiences along those lines. Mm-hmm. The places we looked at required things that Shirley couldn't do. We were looking at, in the last 6 months, we were looking at adult daycare, and they required that she be fully ambulatory. And by that time, Shirley was starting to fall too often, and they didn't want to do that. She did not have a problem with incontinence, though there were accidents every now and again, but that was enough to make her not qualified for those type of things. So my experience there was pretty much nothing.
And then as it relates to, either caregiver support or the family support, so there is a Lewy Body Dementia Association, LBDA. You can find them online. They have a lot of good resources, a lot of good information on their website, because a big part of this is just understanding what is this and why is my loved one behaving this way. There was someone that I know who, when they found out what type of physician I was and the types of patients I took care of, he said, my gosh, I wish I had known more about Lewy body dementia, because my dad, we all thought, just had Parkinson's, but it turns out he had dementia with Lewy bodies, and all the behaviors that he had and the way he was acting, the way he was treating us, and how quickly he would get violent and whatever it was. He said, I blamed him. I thought he was being a jerk. Why are you doing that? He didn't understand that this was the disease. It wasn't his dad. And so, as you said, knowledge is power. But beyond the Lewy Body Disease Association, there is, even within the Carolinas, the Parkinson's Association of the Carolinas, or PAC. You can find them online. They have a nice sort of catalog, if you will, of all the different support groups around the region. Some are for patients, some are for caregivers, some are for both. We have a couple of different offerings through our office, the caregiver support groups, some that meet in person, some that meet virtually, and those, all the information should be on our website, Memory and Movement Charlotte, mmclt.org. You can find a lot of good information there, and that's where I would start to look. And I think there were, I think I saw someone typing something like, who can see your messages, or are there any in the chat, any questions in the chat box?
There's none in the chat box. So at this time, if you have any questions, feel free to put them in the chat, or if there's any questions from the audience in person.
I have a question. When they are hallucinating and seeing people, should you avoid asking questions like, who is that? Or like, you know?
I don't think you necessarily need to avoid that.
I play along with my
ask what you're seeing. Ask what are you seeing, and really, because trying to understand the context behind it. Because just because somebody has hallucinations, it doesn't mean we have to treat them. I treat the hallucinations that are really frightening, that are causing distress, that may cause injury. A very common hallucination is people will see small children in their house that aren't real, or they may see cute little animals in their house that aren't really there. Those are fine, but one of my patients, he looks out the window and sees people in his yard, charging toward the door, so he goes to get his shotgun. So first of all, we took a shotgun away, but second, you have to treat those types of hallucinations, because people are in danger of hurting themselves or others, and there are medications that can be used to treat these hallucinations when needed. And there are some, thankfully now, that are newer that don't have all the horrible side effects that some of the older ones did. But yeah, I think just understanding the context. What are you seeing? Is it frightening? But again, trying to talk them out of it, or saying it's not real, that doesn't get any traction. But just understanding, what are you seeing? And as he said, sometimes people can just go and put a throw pillow on top of it, and that's a way for them to tell if is it real or not. It's hard for them to distinguish. So that's one piece of advice we give them.
Touch it.
Yeah, throw a pillow at them. Go put a blanket on it, and if they start asking you, why are you giving me a blanket, they're probably really there. But if they disappear, they're generally not. And one trick that a lot of patients can learn is that if you tell the hallucinations, tell the people to go away, sometimes that works.
Byron, did you and Shirley find out soon enough that you were able to have a conversation with how things would look? Did they tell you that the dementia was something that might be a possibility because initially your diagnosis was Parkinson's? Did anybody tip you off about that? I know you said you were with the practice before, so yes. I know if you were here, they would have talked to you about it, but did you have that, and did you have an opportunity to have a conversation with what care would look like? And I know somebody had asked about the memory care, if you guys had a chance to talk about those things.
Not initially. When she was diagnosed in Colorado, and that was pretty much just the physical stuff. Mm-hmm. We came here, went to Duke up in Raleigh. They referred us to a physician down here, the one who wouldn't look Shirley in the eye. And those conversations were very clinical. And it was just walk down the hall, do this, do that, do the other stuff. It was we were numbers. Another, yes, you can do this. Yes, you can do that. No, you can't do this. When we came here, Robert and I had the first discussions about what the future was going to hold. Now, I knew I had done enough research by then to have asked the right questions, but Robert was prepared to talk to that about anyway, as were you. So we had an idea of what the hallucinations would be. The kicker is that they were coming. What no one can tell you is how they're going to manifest in your individual situation. Shirley went through all of those. I mean, we put pallets on the bed at night for children that didn't exist. She put plates on the table with food for kids that weren't there. But again, something that I decided I am not going to worry about that. It got to the point where I would say, did you put the pallets out, honey? Why fight it? What was it? It was a pillow and a blanket on the floor that my wife thought was important. And I got up before in the morning, I could pick them up on my way to make breakfast. Some battles aren't worth fighting. And if it makes your partner, in my case, comfortable, and she thinks she's doing the right thing for somebody else who she was, then why stop it? She had joy in that. She didn't have much joy the last 6 months. And I'm not going to take that away. I'm sorry, I hope I answered your question.
Yeah, any answer you give is fine, because it's yours, but yeah.
Thank you.
Well, no, because I know sometimes it's hard for people to have that conversation. And I know, like, because I work with people living with different kinds of dementias, and so even though I am still fine, I said to my kids, you know, hey, these are things that may happen. You never know, right? And I think that luckily, you know, diagnosing things that has improved so much that you can have those conversations early, and potentially really free up family members and take away some of that guilt by saying, you know, like, you may get to the point that you can't take care of me anymore, and that's okay.
Yes.
I
Yes.
don't, you know, you have to. But having those hard conversations stuff, and I love hospice for those many reasons. They can facilitate that, but hopefully, because dementia can be, you can live so long with different dementias that you do want to be able to have them sooner than the time you hit that hospice point.
It's important. It's important to have that conversation with the patient too.
Yes, that's what I was wondering if Shirley was able to activate.
Shirley understood it. She intellectually understood it.
Mhm.
Her greatest fear in life was being put into a home.
Mm-hmm.
She had seen her mother go through that as a result of Alzheimer's. She had seen my mother go through. No, my mother had Alzheimer's. Shirley saw her go through what the family had to do as far as putting her in a place. Her mother had dementia and was in assisted living. And she said, I don't want to do that. Promise me you won't do that to me. And every now and again, her hallucinations made her believe that we were doing things to make that happen. Remember the psychiatrist went to see? Mm-hmm. I don't remember what his name was. But he said something in that office that made Shirley believe that Dr. Iyer and I and this psychiatrist were colluding to put her into a home. She stormed out, screaming. Shirley was not a screamer. She was a lady. But she was so mad at me. If she'd have to ride home, she'd have walked. But that's what she believed. Because I mean, it just took just a little thing and it triggered it. But we were able to convince her that no, we're going to take care of you for as long as I'm possibly. Honey, as long as I'm standing, you're never going to go into a facility. And we did that.
And you know what I had tried to explain to Shirley, and knowing she may not understand or grasp the reasoning, but I said I'd like to involve a psychiatrist, a colleague of mine, because there is a medication for the hallucinations that requires very frequent lab tests. You have to do weekly blood tests because there's some dangerous side effects, but it's incredibly effective when people are on that medication, and the psychiatrists have more training in how to manage it. So I wanted to involve the physician in considering that medication. But once I saw what the reaction was, then that I said, okay, you know, we don't have to go in that direction.
No, we did not go there.
Did you have? Can you speak a little to the sundown?
Sundowners.
With the Lewy body.
Yeah, so you know, sundowning is sort of the term we use. You know, sort of the witching hour. You know, often the day goes pretty well, but you know, around 3, 4, 5 in the afternoon, as the sun's starting to go down. That's when patients they're tired. It's been a long day already, but that's where we often see behavioral changes. And that's where we see either anxiety, we see agitation, we see people just, you know, pacing back and forth. There's something going on. They're not understanding, more confusion. And so it's tricky because, again, there are a lot of ways you can redirect people and try to put on some soothing music. Let's change the subject. Let's look at some family albums. But often, you know, medications are needed, and we try to just understand most people, there's usually a time when it starts to ramp up. And so we'll use low doses of certain medicines and give them, you know, if they typically start going off the rails at 3 in the afternoon, then let's give the pill at 2. just sort of prevent it from happening, and not to sedate or tranquilize someone, but just things that will just take the edge off, because that's really often all you need to do is just take the edge off of what they're feeling. But it's often because they're tired. The brain is tired, and their brain's having to work twice as hard.
What's the difference between a delusion and hallucination?
So, the technical difference is a hallucination is when people see something that's not really there. It's an image. They see people, they see animals, they see all kinds of things that are not really there. Whereas a delusion is they believe something's happening that really isn't. Like there's a woman in Byron's car waiting for him, or one common one is that the caregiver, you're trying to poison me, so they'll stop eating the food you're cooking. So it's something that they believe is happening. There are people out to get us. Someone's trying to take our money, that type of thing. So
Yep. And it's real. If they believe it, they believe it.
Mhm.
And you cannot get beyond that. Changing the subject works. Distraction works. So anything to get off that subject if you possibly can, but it will be back. Shirley was convinced that we have squatters in our house. Every night we'd have to walk the house. There's somebody upstairs. And we get up and get flashlights, didn't eat flashlight, and walk the house. But it got twice I was away at night. She called the police because she thought there were people in the house. The Union County cops got to know us by name. Not where you want to be known for, but they understood too.
Yeah. Well, Byron, I know that I can speak for myself, but I'm sure speaking for everybody, thank you so much for sharing your experience. It touched my heart. Yeah, thank you for your vulnerability. And so we're going to go ahead and wrap up today. But once again, thank you all for coming. Thank you if you're online. Thank you so much for joining and participating in this conversation. And every single month, this is something we do with different topics. So just be on the lookout for the website. We'll be posting the next month's topic on there, on Facebook, on social media, and we'll keep in touch, and hopefully we'll see you next time. But if you have any lingering questions, you can always shoot us an email to email@mmclt.org, and we'll try to help out where we can. Other than that, I hope you guys have a great remainder of your day. Yep, and that's all.
Thank you.
Thanks,
so much.
Cody.
Of course, thank you so much.
Bye-bye. Great job.